Welcome to the Gals Guide to the Galaxy podcast, where a group of gals gather for you one cool thing around our topic of the month. Is it ancient history? Is it breaking news? Is it safe for work? Well, that's up to each gal. All we know is that...
Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
Welcome back. I am Leah, and I am joined by Bonnie and Katie and Pamela, and we are talking about our one cool rebel gal, Barney. Barney? Congrats, you have a new name. Bonnie, I believe, is how it's pronounced. Bonnie.
What's her name?
Barney. Yes, that's right. And the what's her name? That's right. We were drinking a lot that episode when Katie straight up forgot who Bonnie was. This is true. But let's see. Bonnie already talked about Shojin. No. Chao Jin, right? We don't know. And Pamela talked about the Women's Battalion of Death. See, that one I pronounced right because I'm so excited. But before we dive back in, let's get to know something random about our gal pals. So my rando question for you is, what is your favorite protest song? Because I love me a good protest song, like any day of the week. Like Tuesdays, protest song. Thursday, protest song.
Gosh, don't you guys automatically think about all the music that came out during the Vietnam War?
Right? There's that.
Those are some classic hits. I mean, I know it's much broader. I would have to say mine is Fortunate Son.
Oh, there you go.
By Creedence Clearwater Revival, yeah.
Unfortunately makes me think of Forrest Gump because, yeah.
Well, all of them are on Forrest Gump.
Yeah, exactly. It was an epic scene in Forrest Gump, and I'm like going, I had memories of this song pre-Forrest Gump, and yet
No, you don't.
Forrest Gump has invaded that particular memory, but that is a good song.
It's just one of those songs that the rhythm and the tune just automatically pulls me in. Mm-hmm. And it has been used in so many movies. And I was so pissed. Did you see the video of Trump using it at one of his rallies?
Really?
I was like, do you even understand what this song is saying?
Do you remember when Reagan used Born to Run, which was also a protest song against Vietnam? I'm like, you don't know what this song is.
Right, and that was my choice, was Springsteen's Born in the USA. And yeah, it's like, did you not listen to the words?
I know.
Well, he was complaining, what was it, Rolling Stones, I think it was, didn't want him to use the music at the protests, and he replied that that's very un-American. It's like,
they're not American. They are kind of the Marie Curie in this situation, where everybody thinks Marie Curie is American. She's not. Yeah. You know what I thought was weird about that is the Rolling Stones generally say yes to any kind of money. I mean, any kind. And they said no to that, and I'm like, oh, they have a standard.
Yes, how low can you go?
I know, right? That was the line. We found it. Mm-hmm. So, Pamela, was yours Born in the USA?
Absolutely.
It's a great song.
It's a great song.
I love that song. Fantastic. Bonnie, do you have one?
I do, and I just realized I did not write down her name. So I Googled it real quick.
Right, exactly.
I found it during the Women's March.
Mm-hmm.
Really, I found it because I found it was the Church of Stonewall is the people performing it. They did
like
a flash mob in Sweden, I think.
Oh.
They did a flash mob of I Can't Keep Quiet. And I'm trying to remember. It's like,
is it Halsey?
Malik. It's Milck.
Okay,
That's
gotcha.
the lady's name, and like her version is very different from the Church of Stonewall one because they're all wearing like the pink hats, and they've taken over like a train station like lobby.
Nice.
And it's really good. I also wrote down. It's not really a song. I'm not real familiar with her, but I was very familiar with at the Women's March the Halsey.
Is it Halsey?
Is that her name? Maybe.
Halsey.
She had really good, like, I'm not even sure if poem's the right word.
Slam poetry?
So, it was something.
Okay, gotcha.
about this is about like abuse, really.
Oh, I remember the one you're talking about. That was powerful. Yeah.
Yes.
I do remember that. I will I'll also put all of the glorious music videos to our songs and that in the show notes. This is when show notes work really, really well when we're talking about either like, you know, music or movie clips or something like that. It's kind of like, this is what we're talking about just in case you haven't seen it, but yes. No, that is very true. I like that one. Mine is The Revolution Will Not Be Televised by Gil Scott Heron. I wrote a quick article about that song on the Gals Guide blog because I'm so obsessed with that song. It's a great song. It is very much spoken poetry, really, to a backbeat. And it was published in 1971. So it was very much about the civil rights era. And about the revolution will not be televised. You cannot watch it on, and it talks about all advertising and the media and how it's important to get out there and do the revolution, not just watch the revolution. And I kind of freaked out when it was in the trailer for Black Panther because not many people knew of this song. And so when I heard it in Black Panther, I'm like, oh, people are going to know this song. And then it was barely in the movie, but that's okay because it was in the trailer and I was really excited. So I wrote an article. But I love that freaking song. But my gal, it kind of ties in because it actually has a lot to do with civil rights because weirdly, somehow, because we taped this early, it feels weird. So we're taping this early, but this episode is releasing on January 18th, 2021, you know, if we make it that far. But it is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So it ties into civil rights. And I thought I would start with this loaded question for y'all. Has anybody ever thought about why Martin Luther King Jr. has a national holiday? Because, I mean, the post office isn't closed for, like, Betsy Ross or Susan B. or Elvis or anything. Has anybody given it a ponder of why? Dun, 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 dun. No idea? Because there's only, like, it's like George Washington had one for a while. It's very few people actually get a national federal holiday where you don't have to go to work with some companies, or at least you get, you know, paid time off sort of thing.
Is it because somebody passionate fought for the day to happen?
You know right where I'm heading. Good job, Katie. Gold star on your forehead. Yes, it's because of my gal, Coretta Scott King. She fought for 15 years for the campaign to get a national federal holiday to honor Martin Luther King Jr. So today I'm going to tell you about Coretta, because she was not just a sideline participant. And I think a lot of people don't know how active she was, and also how educated she was. She was very much an active rebel for peace, and she's not always seen in the media necessarily in that way. She was involved with civil rights before she met Martin. She was there at the marches holding Martin's hand through most of them. She also continued the fight for freedom past his death as well. So a little kind of overview on Coretta, because she had a very long life and also a very active life. She was one of the most influential leaders of her time. She embraced nonviolent practice. She learned that from the close friends of Mahatma Gandhi. Like, I'm just saying, like Mahatma Gandhi at that point was no longer with us, and she learned from the close comrades of him. Coretta was also in the media mostly for her civil rights work, but she spoke out on behalf of the rights of women, children, the LGBTQ community, the poor. She was a voice for radical justice, for economic justice, for environmental justice, and for nuclear disarmament. So she had like a lot of causes that she was adding her voice to and adding her presence to. And how she got there, because I'm always like, what was the seed? What was the inspiration? What was the spark to try to do, John Lewis always called it good trouble. What's the spark to good trouble? So when Coretta was little, her father owned a lumber mill that was burned down because he refused to sell it to a white male logger. Right? Yeah, so you burn it all down. Coretta's father was very influential in their town. He was the first Black man to own a vehicle in their town. Before being a businessman, he was a police officer in Alabama, in their town. Coretta saw her father achieve great heights only to struggle because of the color of his skin. It was like that was the only thing that was holding him back or taking away what he had struggled to get in the first place. Now, Coretta herself was a very gifted singer. She went to Antioch College in Yellow Springs, Ohio. She studied music and was working to get her teaching certificate. She was not allowed, however, to student teach in Yellow Springs Public School. Why? Because she was a Black woman. So in order to be able to be a teacher, you need this thing called a teaching certificate, and they weren't letting her because of the color of her skin. So she didn't see that as fair. And so she joined groups like the local NAACP, the Race Relations on the college campus, and the Civil Liberties Union. Her quest for justice and equality continued when she got a scholarship. She went to the New England Conservatory in Boston for music, and that's actually where she met Martin, was in Boston. When Martin asked to marry her, she really saw before her two choices. One was a career in music, which is where she was heading, which is what her gifts were, what her talent was, and how she saw she was going to support herself. But then the other one was the civil rights movement and going with Martin. And she chose Martin and the movement. That's what she chose. She said in her book, quote, "What most did not understand was that I was not only married to the man that I loved, but I was also married to the movement that I loved." So very much in accepting his proposal of marriage and choosing Martin was very much going, yeah, let's just some good trouble. You know what I mean? Let's start a revolution. So Coretta and Martin would move to Alabama. They would have 4 children together. She very much had to balance mothering and also her work in the movement. It was very much a balance. She still was speaking at church groups. She was speaking at college groups, at peace groups. Girl was everywhere. She did also use those singing talents. They finally came in handy. She sang at freedom concerts that they had that raised money for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. So that was kind of nice. And I'm like going, oh, her singing really did help. She also later had a friendship with Stevie Wonder, and Stevie Wonder sang a nice little song called Happy Birthday to Martin Luther King Jr. and raised some more money. So she knew that singing would really, really help get people excited and involved and donate as well. But Coretta always kept learning. That was the one thing really from my research. I just saw her just a sponge, just always wanting to learn more and more. She traveled with Martin to Guyana to actually see the firsthand transfer of power. They had recently went through an all-out battle and established their independence, and so Coretta went. Coretta was also there in India, learning from Gandhi's close cohorts about nonviolence. She wanted to learn herself. She was there in Oslo when Martin got the Nobel Peace Prize. She was right there. She also went to Geneva to serve on the Women's Strike for Peace as a delegate to the 17th National Disarmament Conference. So that's where her nuclear disarmament activism came into play. So she was one of the delegates.
I'd never heard that before.
Right? Exactly.
That she did that. No.
Yeah, she was all over the place.
Yeah.
Learning things, helping things, eager to use her voice. Yeah.
Very cool.
Well, unfortunately, we kind of know that in 1968, Martin Luther King was shot and killed, right? Terrifying. This is how Coretta dealt with that devastating loss. This is what she said. Because his task was not finished, I felt I must rededicate myself to the completion of his work. That's how she dealt with it. She turned all of that sadness and trauma and fear into, oh no, we just got to get it done now. And it was amazing. So she opened the King Center in Atlanta, Georgia, which if you have not gone, I highly recommend when it's not COVID times, when the world is normal again, to totally go. The King Center is a national historic park. It includes educational programs, Martin's birth home, and a living memorial that actually houses both of them, Martin and Coretta. Over 1 million people in non-COVID times visit there a year. So definitely go visit. She also started the Coretta Scott King Book Award. Have you ever seen that little, it's like a little triangle that's on books, a lot of times young adult books. But it's an award that she established 51 years ago. And it was for outstanding African-American authors and illustrators for books for children and young adults that demonstrate the appreciation of African-American culture and universal human values. So we have a couple of books at the Gals Guide Library that have the Coretta Scott King Book Award. One of them is The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. So I wanted to give that one a wonderful shout out. Because it was one of the more recent ones that got one. And I'm like, oh, we have this book. Sorry, I get very excited when we have a book. But from Martin's death in 1968 to 1983, Coretta worked with many people to campaign for this federal holiday. The bill that became finally the law of the land was brought to the president by Indiana Representative Katie Hall. Did you guys know that it was brought? We're Indiana people, and we didn't know, right? No, we didn't know. She's also the first African-American woman to represent Indiana, by the way.
I don't know that
we have never heard of Katie Hall up in Indiana. Right. So, yeah. So I shame spiraled for a little bit. Not knowing that, but now I know, because when you know better, you do better, right? But this is also the point where I have to remind people that President Reagan was kind of a dick, because I feel like every now and again it kind of needs to be brought up a little bit. Even though he signed the law to have it be a federal holiday, he did not want MLK Day at all. He didn't want to get people to be too excited. Now, this is Walter Isaacson wrote this in a Time magazine article, and I quote, "Faced with the inevitable congressional passage of the bill to make MLK's birthday a national holiday, Reagan swallowed his long-standing objections that this would open the door to many other groups seeking similar holidays, and decided that he would just support the measure." Now, those other groups he means are women and minorities. So we have this holiday because there was a lot of support for it, and he thought that, well, I'm going to give him one. So yay, Representative Katie Hall, who we all now know about, and screw you, Reagan. Anyway, that's just my opinion. But even though the holiday was finally signed into law, it was 3 years before it took effect. Okay. Even when it was finally observed, states still resisted the holiday. I'm sure you can guess which states, y'all. The southern states? Yes. No, Indiana was cool with it. Because,
really? Because I never remember getting the day off school.
Really?
Or it being that recognized. Yeah.
Gotcha.
No, I don't remember getting it off.
I think sometimes it was a make-up snow day.
Make-up snow
yes.
day, yeah.
Snow, we would go, but...
I grew up in Michigan, and we did have the make-up snow day. Pamela, do you remember celebrating it? Before 2000?
In 1983, I was in my third year of graduate school. So we didn't get days off for that kind of thing.
Right.
And since I grew up in the Ozarks, we also didn't have makeup snow days.
Right, there you go. You're like,
so it's all alien to my childhood.
That is totally fair. No, it was the South. The South really didn't like the idea of a national holiday for an African American. And so what the Southern states did, I couldn't believe this. The Southern states decided, hey, you know what? Robert E. Lee's birthday is right around that time. We're just going to celebrate that. So the paid holiday, they went, sure, paid holiday. Post office closed, bank closed. That's cool. But we're calling it Robert E. Lee Day. Yeah. So the law was established and started to be observed in 1986, right? What year do you think it was that finally all 50 states were on board that had, like, you know, an option of a paid day off and things like that? So between 86 and now, 2004.
2012.
2012. You guys are so...
I was
Pamela, you got to guess?
Possibly never, but...
Right, you're like, and still today! No, actually 2000. So fine, it's better than you all worried about, yes. But not until 2000 did all 50 states observe the holiday. Apparently Arizona was last, and only because they threatened to take some NFL money away. Uh-huh. We still have a ways to go. So also in my research, I asked the silly question to myself, if any other countries celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Day, because yeah, it's, you know, here an American holiday. He was an American citizen, but believe it or not, Canada, Israel, Japan, and the Netherlands actually recognize the day, even though it's not a paid day off from school or work, but they usually do some kind of celebration and honoring, which I thought was pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
So yes, so there's a lot more, I will say, on Coretta. So she's a fascinating woman, and I really don't feel like I've given her like enough credit in this little short bit. But her participation in the movement, the crap that she kind of put up with being in the movement, and also kind of being sidelined to history. We'll also say MLK was not a saint, okay? He did have some marriage vows sketchiness. So, you know, just one of the things. Well, I'll call it as it is. Plus, Coretta also had to deal with actual violence at their home. Their front porch was bombed at one point. So Coretta was a force of nature. She was right there. She was definitely a rebel in her own time and in her own way. She is a different kind of rebel. And so I thought with the holiday, it was like it was a convergence. That's what it is. It was like a convergence of Saturn and Jupiter. And it was like, the podcast gets released on MLK Day. And I'm like, but what about Coretta? So there you go. That is what I have for you on my glorious research. See, what surprised you most?
I didn't know she was so political. I mean,
Gotcha.
Honestly, I think I just, you know, this history I've been taught didn't feature her as anything but MLK's wife.
Right. Yeah. The arm candy, for lack of a better word, like, and then the wife was there.
Oh, and then the protector of the legacy, but
of course,
like knowing she was active and interested in civil rights before she even met him.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I was actually surprised by the music piece of it.
Oh, gotcha.
Particularly since music was such a clear part of the civil rights movement.
It was, yeah, because they would sing as they marched too, right?
Yeah, you reminded me I need to go down the little wormhole of looking up, because I remember that little tidbit thing about like the FBI like bugging them and told her about her husband's affairs and stuff. I remember being like, I need to look back and see how she thought about that. Dealt with that.
The thought I always had on that, I know I dug into it a little bit, like, you know, not just, I will say surface level, so I could be, I thought what it was is the FBI didn't actually have a recording of Martin in Conquest, but they played similar sounds to Coretta. And it was in the Selma movie. That's why I dig down on it, because in the Selma movie, the character that, Coretta says, "Did they think I wouldn't know what my own husband sounds like?" But at the same time, she has this look on her face like, "I know it wasn't you on that tape, but I know it was you." You know what I mean? Like, you're trying, and I already know, and it already sucks. It can't get any worse. But she still stood by him. So, yeah. She was also really good friends with Malcolm X's widow as well, Betty Shabazz. The two of them really found not only obvious common ground of civil rights leaders who were slain, but they had a lot in common. So beyond that, and that was powerhouse.
The whole "nevertheless she persisted" thing came from, I think they were trying to confirm, was it Jeff Sessions?
Oh, yeah.
Somebody. And Coretta had written a letter,
right,
like 20 years ago or something, like really long time ago, basically talking about this dude's a racist and not qualified for any job ever. And so they had already read it. It had already been in the congressional record. And then Elizabeth Warren's just trying to reread it.
Right.
And told to shut up.
But nevertheless, what was it? She was warned. She was
warned, given an explanation, and nevertheless she persisted.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, but she was reading a letter from Coretta Scott King. Well, that wraps it up for us this week. Join us next week as our next gal pal shares her one cool rebel gal as the Gal's Guide podcast continues. Thanks for listening. For show notes, links, and images from this week's show, visit galsguide.org. Want exclusive stuff like deleted bits and major bloopers? Become a Gal's Guide patron today. Thanks for listening.